think one of the key points is that initially there was a lot of talk about the financial crisis, and that makes some sense in London, in Washington, places where the banks are centred. But I think it's worth stepping back from that a bit, because the financial crisis is one piece of a bigger picture, and sometimes in a lot of the world people engage firstly through a crisis of land, of water, of a series of other crises that are going on in parallel, of food as well. And so I think we need to see these things more systemically. And in that way, I mean, to frame it in terms of an economic crisis, but an economic crisis which is systemic and it has key social effects, is a kind of better starting point for thinking about how these things relate. And so, I mean, you can then take it obviously a long way back to look at, well, what was the fundamental conditions of industrialization upon which the current modes of production were built? And then you're looking really to, the current energy systems and fossil fuel-based energy that we're now saying is unsustainable. At the same time saying, well, it's not enough to simply then just try and sort of decouple a little bit of renewable energy here and there, while at the same time maintaining the same growth models, the same expansion models. We need to really think more systemically about what are our needs, what are the energy needs we meet, what are the energy needs we need, and what are the energy needs that are just fueling further consumption that we can do away with and still live a good life and a fulfilled life, but at the same time not having such devastating planetary impact or social justice impact, particularly on people in the global south who face the earliest and most devastating effects of the climate problem, while at the same time not being the cause of the climate problem.
Okay. Now, how do you think, for instance, the world coming here to the social forum, to the World Social Forum, how do you think that can sort of help in developing sort of alternatives and social movements and so forth to confront the issue?
Social forums are really a useful space of connecting movements. A lot of times people deal with very similar issues or adjacent issues, but frame them in slightly different ways. And that's really key with the climate as well, because sometimes it can seem that you really need to have spent years studying the science, or it has a very technical basis. Actually, a lot of the issues are really the same issues of social justice that we see in a lot of other contexts. And so if we can see those as a continuation of struggles around colonialism, of land issues, or of expropriation by large transnational corporations, which are things that the ultra-globalization movement has been struggling around a long time, then people can see that there's a continuum there, and the climate is not something else, nor is it something new as an issue. I mean, it's something that there's been a long history of climate justice struggles going on around the world, sometimes under different names, sometimes it's land or water issues, but it's worth noting, I think, those two things.
And how about, do you think this social forum this year in Amazonia is different than others? What is the difference between this social forum and other ones that you've been to?
I've not been to that many social forums. So I went to the Mumbai one in 2004 and also the ESFs. But I would say obviously the location is really crucial in terms of it being in the Amazon, where deforestation issues in particular are just so crucial and are so connected into even the negotiations on the climate at the moment globally. There's this whole issue called reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation. What it means is putting a price on forests. It's like a tragedy of the commons argument, that just simply by pricing forests you can start to tackle the drivers of deforestation. What's really evident from what's happened to the Amazon and what happens to other large intact forests is that that's nothing to do with the real drivers of deforestation. It's not people slashing down forests in a really small scale. What the problems are is pulp mills, mining, infrastructure projects in forest. Really, these are really big drivers, also that smaller deforestation, and we need to tackle those things, and a price mechanism alone would help. So I think that even if you just look at what's happening and has happened to the Amazon in relation to soy expansion, agri-fuels, cattle industry, then I think you can sort of make, it's obviously a place where you can make sense of that here in Belem, where it's such a live and real issue.
And finally, what do you want? What would it be a good outcome from this social forum?
I think there's some immediate objectives. Obviously, a lot of the people working on the climate are really mobilising towards the UN climate conference in December in Copenhagen. And there's obviously, and that's not just a single event. That's part of an ongoing sort of process where we found that really, the global climate agreement is really like a trade negotiation, and increasingly becoming so. So there's quite a lot of scepticism about really that anything good can come of that agreement. And in the past, under the Kyoto Protocol, that led to a whole series of market mechanisms. So I think really making that connection is going to be really important. But then also just there's a whole series of issues that are still not really fully joined up. For example, there could be a lot more interaction between people working on climate and working on labour issues. Also, deepening the analysis of how climate and trade issues relate. So really making those connections, both in a formal sense, in an intellectual sense, but also in a political and personal sense between people. Because a lot of actually what's positive about this social forum is really it gives you a visible sense of what this kind of ultra-globalization movement we have is. And it gives you a lot of hope sometimes as well to see that people are active in many spheres, often that you don't know about, but there is that kind of solidarity between people, so we're struggling towards the same goals for a better and more just and more environmentally sustainable world.